Hi everyone. This collection of videos has been put together from other ones I have published in the past. These are profiles I created on the victims and those involved with the crimes, the Tate LaBianca Hinman crimes of 1969. Now, these are just profiles. They're not complete as in, I did what I could. I went to Michigan. There's footage from London here. There's all sorts of stuff from all over the place. And I wanted to put them in one place because some of the people who have followed my work may have missed one or two, and the people who are just now maybe finding my work for the first time will see the complete stories that I put together so far of the victims. A notable exception is Sharon Tate, because there is a lot of information out there about Sharon. This video, or these videos, concentrate more on the lesser famous people. Again, I don't want to put this one's more important than the other. I don't mean that at all. I'm just meaning as far as coverage goes. These are profiles on Stephen Parent and Jay Sebring, and there's good stuff about Abigail Folger, and this is just very interesting stuff that I've collected. So, and also included in this are Vincent Bugliosi's story, Rusty, the bailiff from the trial who was on the People's Court, and George Spahn as well, a curious man whose name will always be associated with these crimes, though not directly involved with these crimes. Now, there's an organization I'm going to tell you about a little bit later on at the end of this video. It's called Justice for Homicide Victims, and they are a nonprofit who provide help, assistance, and guidance to people who have been affected by major crimes, homicides, murders. When the detectives clean things up and after it's over, these people are devastated who are left behind. And it provides them assistance. It provides them legal advice to go to parole hearings and things like that. So stay tuned at the end of this video for that. I started the video with one that's a little bit more lighthearted, and it's of Sharon and Roman's London, when they were very happy, when they first got married, and where they lived until they came back to America. That was put together by my friend Rob, the history explorer, and he generously gave that video to me to share with people. And so that starts off a bit happy, but then we get into the tragedy. I try not to get into it too detailed to the actual crimes themselves, but these are their stories. These are their stories about their lives, where they worked, where they hung out for fun, and their last movement. So thank you for joining this. I hope that you find these profiles. I hope you find these profiles interesting. Back when I lived in London, I did a lot of research about the celebrities in London, the same stuff I did in LA, where people lived, where they died, where they're buried, that sort of thing. Jimi Hendrix and Vivian Leigh and Keith Moon and Cass Elliot, and of course Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. Now, I did a lot of looking for Sharon Tate locations, and I found a ton of them too. But there's one location that I couldn't do because I was told it was gone, the Chelsea Registry Office. So the Chelsea Registry Office is where Sharon and Roman were actually married. And when I was looking for these locations, I called the current Chelsea Registry Office. It was current as of, 25 years ago. And they told me that it was gone. So I never took it any further. Well, Rob, my friend in Britain, actually found a lot of the Sharon Tate locations and shot these locations and recreated or took exact photographs of where the original pictures were taken. And he just gave me the video. He said, this will be really, this is made really for your audience. And so I'm grateful. And I took it. I was really kind of shocked and thrilled, because I think you guys will love it. I love this video. And I'm honored that he chose to just let us have it. So Rob, thank you very much. And everyone, sit back and relax for a few minutes of Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski in London, England.
For one of the most sensational murder trials in American history.
The world is getting crazy.
Can't you see I'm out? Can't you see I'm free?
The past is gone, and now I know inside the cells, nowhere to go.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is London. Swinging London, it's been called, though some people might find a different adjective.
Put on a gown that touches the ground. Float on the river forever and ever. Emily, Emily.
Well, we are taking a slightly different turn this week as we look at the iconic Sharon Tate and her time in London in the 1960s. Now, Sharon Tate was, of course, victim of one of the most infamous murders in American crime history, committed by followers of Charles Manson in August 1969. These murders effectively brought an end to the 60s and the hippie movement. This video will focus on her time in London, looking at the places where she lived, the location that she was married, and the places that she enjoyed the most. At each location, I will show you a composite then and now picture comparing these locations. From her first apartment in London, in Eaton Square, to her wedding venue, long believed to have been torn down years ago. I've found the very steps which Sharon and Roman descended as a newly married couple. I also look at her favourite haunts on the King's Road, and finally, I take you to her last apartment in London, the house she shared with Roman Polanski after she was married and before she made that fateful trip back to Los Angeles. So I'm currently stood outside number 65 Eaton Square in a very affluent part of London. Sharon lived here in 1965 in the lead up to the filming of her first feature film, Eye of the Devil. As you can see, it is a very nice London townhouse, and I'm told the last house to sell on this square sold for £30 million. Now this house has been separated into apartments, but I'm told by the caretaker of the square, there is such a title, that this used to be a single dwelling, and he believes that when Sharon lived here, it was a single dwelling at the time as well. Now I recognise that post box. There is a quite famous picture of Sharon entering into a limousine right outside this property, so I'll see if I can line those up. And you can see here, we've lined that up really well. And the red post box just absolutely stands out really nicely. As you'd expect, the cars in this area all seem incredibly nice. As I said, this is a smart area of London. I'm now heading to Sharon's final home that she lived at in London. She shared this home with Roman Polanski. If only she had stayed here in London to have her baby instead of travelling back to America. What could have been? So Sharon's alleged to have said that she was never happier than when she was in London, and she actually spent most of her pregnancy here before returning to LA. Off we go again, this time to a nearby location. This location was used for a photo shoot in 1967. Again, this is quite an iconic photo. You can see here where Sharon would have been standing next to this cobbled street, which is called a mews. You can broadly line up the houses on the left, although because of lens differences back then compared to what I'm using now, you can never really line it up perfectly, but I think this is quite good. Now for all you Beatles fans out there, during the same year in 1967, the Beatles also visited this area for their own publicity shot. this time at Lyle Mews, which is the next street along. You can see here, although the door colour has changed, the Beatles were stood right out front of this doorway. With the Beatles theme, we are now at 24 Chapel Street in London. This is the former home of Beatles manager Brian Epstein, who sadly passed away inside this house. He died allegedly due to a barbiturates and alcohol-induced overdose, and this house is really famous with Beatles fans. In fact, just before I was filming here, there were 5 Beatles fans sat on the doorstep. Many publicity shots were taken here, and of course many parties were held here, including a party for the Sgt. Pepper album's release. Now I'm going to show you the nearby pub where the Beatles and Brian used to frequent, so come with me. Now the King's Road was a pretty trendy area in 1960, and that is still the case today. It's lined with lots of pubs, and it used to have a couple of famous clubs on the street as well. And I recognise this area. Okay, this is exactly the spot, so I know this is the shop featured in the Life magazine feature with Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. Essentially, they were being followed on the King's Road as they went shopping for an antique lamp, of all things. But in this picture, you can see where they came out of the shop and they crossed the road right next to this postbox. This picture's become quite famous for Polanski and Tate fans, and not a lot has changed on King's Road at all. And these pictures would have been taken within the year that they were married.
I don't really think of the characters as being a sex symbol or sex goddess or whatever you would like to call it.
On to the wedding location. So if you read online, you'll see that the Chelsea Register Office is listed as the location for the Tate-Polanski wedding. So whilst this is technically true, location is a big fat lie. In the 1960s, a different building was used for marriages, and that building is this one here. This is actually an old workhouse, which was then converted into a school building. I've even messaged the great Scott Michaels, who is an expert on Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, and he did not know that this building still existed. He actually believed it had been torn down. So I'm so happy that I've managed to find this and share it with you. Anyone who has seen the wedding pictures will recognise these steps, perhaps the location of Sharon's happiest date in her life. Judy Garland was also married here in 1969, the same year where Sharon was murdered.
minigun bride and the mod-geared mate made for the Playboy Club, and a star...
And outside you can still line up this building here really well.
London. Two top film folk got spliced and the press and public turned out in force. He's Polish-born director Roman Polanski. She's American actress Sharon Tate. And the huge public interest their wedding created shows that the magic of motion pictures is as strong today as ever. After the ceremony at Chelsea Registry Office, the minigun bride and the mod-geared mate made for the Playboy Club, and a star-studded reception.
Right now I'm in El Monte, California, about 15 miles south and east of Los Angeles. And this is the city where Stephen Parent and his family lived. His mother was originally from Illinois, his father was from Wisconsin, and ultimately the family moved to San Diego and ultimately up to El Monte. And by 1969, they were living in this house at 11214 East Bryant Road. The Parent family consisted of the father, Wilfred, mother, Juanita, a sister, Janet, and two brothers, Greg and Dale, as well as Stephen. Now, Stephen Parent was born on February 12, 1951. He was a recent high school graduate. He stood 6 feet tall, was 175 pounds, and went by the nickname Carrot Top. Now, on Friday morning, the 8th of August, 1969, he asked his mother to have a clean change of clothes for him ready when he came home for lunch from his job at the plumbing supply company. He told her that after work there, he wanted to go directly to his evening job at the stereo shop in Beverly Hills. Parent was described by co-workers as clean-cut, intelligent, and a good worker. The last time Juanita saw her son was that afternoon. He changed into the outfit he would be murdered in: a red, white, and blue plaid shirt, blue jeans, white socks, and black shoes. He waved to his mother and drove off in his father's 1966 white Nash Ambassador, similar to this one, license plate MPK 308. This is Arroyo High School. Stephen Parent was a student here. He graduated from this school in 1969. Now, he had been arrested a few times for petty theft, and he spent time in a youth correctional facility. His sister said that Steve was fascinated by electronics and mechanics. He stole several radios, bringing them home and tearing them apart to understand how they worked. She also said that Stephen dated girls here and there. This is the former location of the Valley Cities Supply Company. It was a plumbing supply company, and Stephen Parent worked here full time. He left home at 7:30 a.m. that Friday and came straight here to go to work. According to his father, the boy was going to Citrus Junior College in Azusa next year, and he was working 2 jobs. The other job was with a record or recording company in Beverly Hills someplace. Now, he was a plumber's assistant here. As I understand it, he did do deliveries for this company. And his father worked in construction too, so that would make sense. Sounds like there's a firing range nearby. We're at a very, very, very busy intersection in El Monte, and I saw this and I was like, we gotta stop here. So according to that sign, it says, in celebration of Gay's Lion Farm, from its start on July 1st, 1925 until it closed in December of 42, The roar of hundreds of lions could be heard throughout the valley into the hills and beyond. So I think this is one of the last remaining statues. Probably these posts came from there too. So I guess it stood right here, and that would have been pretty crazy to hear the lions throughout the valley. This is an ad from the Jonas Miller stereo shop. There were two of them. One was in Covina, West Covina. The other one was here in Beverly Hills. Look at the prices on these things. In 1969, for instance, that Fisher 190 watt super system, $619. I looked it up, $4,200 is what that's worth today. But here's Jonas Miller, 8719 Wilshire Boulevard, and here it is. So this is where Stephen Parent worked. So he worked here part-time in the evenings, and I think he helped install stereos and in people's homes. And recently I found this, which is a demonstration album from Jonas Miller Sound. You can see the address, Wilshire Boulevard, right here. And I don't know what this says on it. I don't know what this plays. It's probably a demonstration album of some sort to show how stereo systems will sound. And we're going to go check it out. Now, this shop has been redesigned. I have some photographs which I'm going to insert into the image of the way it looked only a few years ago. Had a cool sort of terrazzo little entryway there, and I'll post those along with it. But this is where Stephen Parent worked part-time in the evenings here in Beverly Hills. So after Parent got off work, he drove up Beverly Boulevard like we are right now, and was heading up to the house on Cielo Drive. Now, there's lots of speculation about the relationship between Stephen Parent and William Garretson. Garretson was from Ohio. He'd only been here for a few weeks when he was picked up hitchhiking on Santa Monica Boulevard by Rudolph Altobelli. Rudolph Altobelli owned the house on Cielo Drive. Rudolph Altobelli was gay. William Garretson, well, you know, I don't know. He had sex with guys, that we know. I think he was probably a street hustler at some point. Not in a big-time way, but that's what the young guys did that were prostitutes back then. They hitchhiked on Santa Monica Boulevard, and Altobelli was an old lech. And not that old at that point, but he probably picked up Garretson. And Garretson fully admits to having sex with guys, just not that night. As I understand it, Stephen Parent picked up Garretson hitchhiking one time and dropped him off to Cielo Drive. So Garretson said, come on up anytime you want. Now, Stephen Parent had spent time in juvenile detention. One of his parole officers did say that Stephen Parent had homosexual and sadistic tendencies. That is the direct quote from one of his parole officers. Most people say, oh, he liked girls. He dated girls. We know for a fact that he did. But there is always going to be that speculation. Why he would have gone up to that house at 11:30 p.m. on a Friday night unannounced seems sort of booty call-esque to me. When Garretson didn't want the clock radio, Stephen Parent called a buddy of his in West Hollywood, and that's where he was heading. That buddy in West Hollywood later on wrote a book dedicating it to Stephen Parent. And there was no romantic intention in the dedication, but it was there were just a lot of factors that led people to believe that Stephen Parent maybe was gay, and it makes more sense that it be a booty call. However, there were tests done on Stephen Parent's body, and there was no evidence of them having sex at all. In his orally or anally, they checked it, and so it was decided that that was not a sexual relationship that the two of them had. Again, the only reason we're talking about this is because we're still talking about this case 51 years later, and it's still fascinating. It's really no relevance as far as their personalities. There's no judgment on that at all. But because we're still talking about it 51 years later, it's interesting. So now we just crossed Sunset Boulevard, and we're now on Benedict Canyon Boulevard, and we're heading up to Cielo. This is exactly where Stephen Parent would have been at that point, after work. But I doubt that Stephen Parent would have been passing Charo's house, which is over there on the left. So beside me in the car is a clock radio. This is a Sony Digimatic clock radio, AM/FM, solid state. This is not the original. This is not the one that he had that night, but this is an exact copy of the model that Stephen Parent had that night. So it was an important piece of evidence because nobody really knew what time the murders occurred. The only one that was left alive on the property was William Garretson, and the other ones were either high or adrenaline or murdered. So the story was that Stephen Parent was going to sell this clock radio, or try to William Garretson. That's why he was up at the house that night for about 45 minutes, half an hour to 45 minutes. And during that time, he plugged in the clock radio, set the time. That's how they knew about what time the murders occurred, or thereabouts. Because by the time William Garretson said goodbye to Stephen Parent, and Stephen Parent left the guest house with this clock radio, or one just exactly like this, under his arm, and got back to his car, the time read, when the bodies were discovered, 12:15. So they figure within a few minutes is from 12:15 was when the murders occurred. So it was an important piece of evidence, and so, as I said, this is an exact copy of the one. Now, when Tarantino was filming Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they did use Cielo Drive, not the house, obviously. And this is Valentino's old stables over here. But Tarantino did use Cielo Drive, driving up and down the street. They put in fake street lights, and this would have been about the point where it was used from here. It's largely unchanged since 1969. It looks a lot like it used to back in '69. No stop signs. It's all nicely paved now. And this is where Cielo Drive continues. The address of the Tate house was 10050. The address was changed to 10066. And that remains the address of the property today, even though the house is long gone. So we are on the exact route that Stephen Parent was on that night. The exact route. And if you remember in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they show this point. Up until the end of that guardrail, they used the real Cielo Drive. At the end of the road where those brown gates are is the property where the Tate house stood. The original gates are probably another 5 to 10 yards beyond those, and where Stephen Parent was killed was another 5 to 10 yards beyond those. The house was destroyed in 1993. Now, Stephen Parent was either the first or the last of the victims that night. Physical evidence, to me, points to him being the last of the victims, but eyewitness accounts point him to being the first of the victims. The only witnesses were the murderers. So the next morning when Mrs. Chapman discovered the bodies, she ran screaming towards us, and she stopped at that first house on the left. That was the Cott family house, and Mr. and Mrs. Cott heard the gunshots that night, didn't call the police because they figured it was just kids playing around. And honestly, why would they? Because things like that just didn't happen in this neighborhood. So the second house wasn't there. The third one, 10090, that's the Asen family house. Jim Asen opened up the door to a hysterical Mrs. Chapman and called the police. That telephone pole on the right is actually authentic. What happened on the other side of those gates? At 12:15 a.m., in the dark, Stephen walks back to the Rambler with a clock radio in his hands. He starts the car and heads towards the gate. Tex Watson hops over the fence at that very moment, holds his hand up and says, "Halt." Tex has a buck knife in one hand and a .22 in the other. Stephen Parent pleads with Watson, "Please don't hurt me. I won't say anything." He raised his arm to protect his face as Tex Watson swung the knife at him, slashing Parent's watch right off of his wrist. The watch landed in the left passenger rear seat. Tex then shot Parent 4 times in rapid succession in the face and chest. The killers agree on this story. The other theory, Stephen Parent was leaving the guest house and while passing the main residence, sees the mayhem occurring inside the house. He locks eyes with Tex Watson. Scared shitless, he runs to his car. The terrified Stephen started the car and accidentally puts his car into reverse, causing damage to the split rail wood fence. The paint matches the scratch marks found on Stephen Parent's car. These are just facts. It also makes sense that Tex may have approached him at this point with the knife, slashing his wrist. Parent then puts the car in drive and proceeds to the gate, but before he gets there, Tex gets to him. That explains him saying, "Please don't hurt me. I won't say anything." If he didn't see anything, what would he have to say? Either way, Stephen Parent's last moments would have been absolutely terrifying. Stephen's cause of death? Multiple gunshot wounds to the chest. When the clock radio was discovered by law enforcement, the time stated 12:15. At some point, someone had carelessly handled the clock radio and the time moved forward 3 minutes to 12:19. So the photograph in evidence of the clock radio has the wrong time on it. Stephen's body was taken to the LA County coroner and booked in as John Doe number 85. For 12 hours, his body was unidentified, even though detectives could have traced the license plate and notified the Parent family fairly quickly. Back in El Monte, Stephen's parents were frantic with worry. Mr. Parent said, quote, "Friday night, for the first time in his life, Steve hadn't come home. He didn't call, didn't leave no word, nothing." On Saturday evening, a reporter who had figured it out went to the Parent home to verify the ownership of the white car. Now, the Parent family were out to dinner, so that same reporter reached out to their parish priest and told the priest of the possibility of Stephen being murdered. The priest went downtown to identify Stephen's body to spare the Parent family the agony of doing it. At the same moment, an El Monte police officer appeared at the Parent's front door and handed Mr. Parent a business card with the telephone number of the LA County coroner. Mr. Parent called the number. He was told, quote, "Your son has apparently been involved in a shooting." "Is he dead?" "We have a body down here and we believe it's your son." Mr. Parent said, "All I can say is that's a hell of a way to tell somebody their boy was dead."
Wednesday was the day of the funerals. More than 150 persons attended Sharon Tate's last rites at Holy Cross. Kirk Douglas, Warren Beatty, Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Lee Marvin, Yul Brynner, Peter Sellers. Many of the same people, including Roman Polanski, later attended the services for Jay Sebring at Forest Lawn. Across the city, at an El Monte church, 6 teenage youths carry the body of their friend, 18-year-old Stephen Parent, to a waiting hearse. Rosary will be recited at 8 p.m. today at the Church of the Nativity in El Monte for Stephen Parent, 18-year-old friend of the Polanski's caretaker, William Garrettson. Parent, whose body was discovered in a car near the Polanski home, will be buried at Queen of Heaven Cemetery after a Requiem Mass in the church at 9:30 a.m. Steve was a credit to his family, to his parish, and to his school, the Reverend Paul L. Peterson told the mourners. Parent's mother, Mrs. Wilfred Parent, wept inconsolably as she followed the casket from the church toward a waiting hearse.
So you guys know that I collect odd things, and I have certain things that I have eBay searches for, and you also know that I'm very victim oriented when it comes to certain things like murders and crimes like that. So one of the things that came up in an eBay search recently was this high school yearbook. It's a 1960 yearbook for the Catalina, or the Catalina is what it's called. It was a Santa Clarita school for girls, a Catholic school for girls that was up north, is still up north in Monterey. Very posh school. We're talking like debutantes, and a lot of money in this school. And a certain heiress went to this school. And this is a picture of her. You can see on the left in this picture is Abigail Folger. That's all for now, says Gibby Folger, Judy Nagel, Curry Griggs, Fife Irvine, Penny Wilson, Holly Spangleberg, and Shirley Glod. So Abigail Folger had a roommate in high school. And that roommate, another very rich person from showbiz roots, right there, Sharon Gless of Cagney and Lacey. So as luck would have it, Sharon Gless was in Palm Springs doing a book signing for her autobiography. Apparently, there were complaints. She was roommates with Abigail Folger. I was hoping to have a few minutes alone with her so I could actually speak to her about Abigail Folger, but she was busy and I kind of sprung it on her, so I understand that. But she was surprised when we showed up with her school yearbook, and she said, "Did you know Abigail Folger?" It's like, well, no, we didn't do that, but we were just really wanted to know more about her as a human being. And she was very kind. What she wrote about Abigail in her autobiography was very brief. She said, "That autumn, I returned to Santa Catalina." That's the school. "I was housed in what's known as the cottage. It was a very small old house on the school property. It had 2 regular bedrooms and 2 very tiny rooms that were open to each other. I was given one of the little rooms, and another classmate was given the other. Her name was Gibby. We were nothing alike. She was in San Francisco and I was in L.A. She was dark-haired and had an angular face, defined by a Roman nose. She was very bright. She excelled at classical piano. I was fair and blonde and considered well-rounded. I excelled at nothing. One night I asked Gibby why she thought the nuns had paired the 2 of us as roommates. She assumed it was because both of our parents were going through divorces. Divorce was really rare then, especially among Catholic families. We were in Peter Pan together. Gibby was Captain Hook and I played Hook's flunky, Smee. In addition to piano, she could sing, dance, and triumphed in sports. Though she was the heiress to a massive coffee fortune, she never mentioned it. We were just kids with similar pain. Gibby was always kind to everyone. It was later reported that she even looked up from the book she was reading and smiled and said hello to the young stranger who paused by her bedroom door at Sharon Tate's home in 1969, where Gibby was a guest. My high school roommate, Abigail Gibby Folger, ran the farthest away, almost making it to the edge of the yard before falling victim to the Charles Manson murderers. I'm still not over it. So I did ask Sharon about Abigail Folger. She wasn't able to speak to me privately, but she did speak for a little while with Troy and I. And I asked her to autograph the school yearbook. She was surprised to see it. And she was actually, she was very surprised to see it, but she was very kind. It was just a nice opportunity to talk to somebody who actually knew Abigail Folger. I've never met anyone that knew her. So I figured I'd show you the yearbook. So let's just go through it rather quickly. Catalinian. Students of Catalina. See, Sharon Gless was not like poor. Her father was a lawyer who worked with Howard Hughes. And actually, interestingly, Sharon Gless was the last contract player ever in movies. When they broke up the studio system, she was the last to be part of the studio system. So I'm just going to page through this. Actually, I put post-its on the pages with photographs. I keep looking for a name like Miffy or Muffy or something like that. Mary Madeline Sophie Dowd. So I believe Abigail Folger was a sophomore at this point, and Sharon Gless maybe a junior. So here's one. Nene Richardson, Pat Flynn, and Sharon Gless. There she is. And down here, that's all for now. Say Gibby Folger, Judy Nagel, Curry Griggs, Pfeiffer, Irvine, Penny Wilson, Holly Sprangelberg, Shirley Glod. It was Nancy Albert's car, but there's Gibby. Let's see, Gibby Folger, front row. So she's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. That's her. Here's another one of Abigail. Fourth row, Sharon Glass. Fourth from the front? Yeah, that's her, I think. It saves a lot of time, me having gone through this already. Someone's in, oh, Gibby, okay. Top row, Jan Hannon, Margie Craig, Ann Irving, and Gibby Folger. There she is. Gibby, there she is. Front row, Tally Bigelow, Kathy Hanks, Murray Stewart, and Gibby Folger. So, there she is. And there's another one in here. Judy, Gibby Folger. So she's standing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there she is on the end. It's a popular girl. The fun begins with Sharon Glass, Seska Peck, and Cam Bedell. There she is. They didn't even get the guys' names.
Abigail Folger was 26. The cause of her death, and the deaths of the 4 people murdered with her, is the concern of scores of investigators in Southern California. But the fact of her death was the overriding thought of those who came to pay their final respects here this morning. The Requiem Mass for Miss Folger was at Our Lady of the Wayside Catholic Church in Portola Valley. Funeral services were also held today elsewhere for another 2 of the 5 people murdered at the Benedict Canyon home last Saturday. Services were planned for men's hairstylist Jay Sebring and 18-year-old Stephen Parent. Movie director Polanski has arranged private unannounced services for his wife, actress Sharon Tate. The 5th victim was a friend of Polanski's, Wojciech Frykowski. Miss Folger was the daughter of Peter Folger, chairman of the board of the Folger Coffee Company. She had attended Santa Catalina School for Women near Carmel and was graduated from Radcliffe. Her father was notified of her murder Sunday at his Woodside home and told reporters later that his daughter had become active in social welfare causes around Los Angeles about 6 months ago and had more or less commuted between there and the family home since then. According to other family sources, Miss Folger was also a business partner of Sebring's and was on hand when he opened a salon on Commercial Street in San Francisco last May. But her stepmother was quoted as saying Abigail's parents did not know of her association with the other people killed last weekend. The search for her killer or killers continues in Los Angeles. After the Mass at church here this morning, private burial services were held. Matt O'Brien for Eyewitness News in Portola Valley.
Hey everyone, Scott Michaels with Dearly Departed Tours here. This next video is about Jay Sebring, the hairstylist who's the second most famous victim of the Tate LaBianca murders, which happened 51 years ago, actually as I record this, 51 years ago today. Now, a lot of people over the years have called me an expert on the crimes. I know a lot about the crimes, but I've never considered myself an expert, and I've always sort of shied away from that title. People come to me and ask me questions. If I have the answers, I'll give them to them. If I don't, I don't. But there's a lot of people that know a lot more about this case than I do. I just try to put it together in an interesting way. I don't really care one bit about what inspired the crimes to happen, who the people that did these awful things, who they were, what inspired them. I could care less. I'm more of a victim-oriented person, and that's what I try to portray. So with that in mind, I hope today you'll learn one or two nuggets about Jay Sebring that you may not have known before. And it's an important story in Los Angeles history, I think in American history. So thanks, and I hope you think I do him justice.
The first time you see your customer, it's good if he's sitting in the chair with his head wet after the shampoo. That way you won't be influenced by the way his hair was styled before.
According to a 50th anniversary article about the murders in Benedict Canyon, the Jay Sebring grew up here in Detroit. Now, he was born in Fairfield, Alabama, and his parents moved here when he was a baby to a home on Ferris Street. Now, Ferris Street is not a very large street, and I can only imagine what it was like back then. But the way it looks today is a little bit different. So this street that I just turned onto is the street that Jay grew up on. And at the end of the street is St. Benedict, which is the school Jay went to. You can see this area is, you know, it was a livelier neighborhood back in the day. A lot more going on back then. Wow. And that's St. Benedict, where Jay went to school. Jay was actually born in Alabama on October 10th, 1933. His mother's name was Margaret Gibb and his father Bernard Cummer. He had one brother and two sisters, and his father worked as an accountant. According to that article, it said that Jay was always drawing and painting. His favorite subjects included cars, pinup women, and Hollywood celebrities. So these are the streets that Jay played on when he was a kid. As you can see, they're a little less active these days. Jay attended Detroit Catholic Central High School, not very far from this neighborhood, and he graduated in 1951. He was a big fan of music. He even worked in downtown Detroit at a music store called Grinnell's. Now, according to the Sebring International website, Jay served in the Navy for 4 years and even fought in the Korean War. And while he was in the Navy, he assisted, or he cut hair for soldiers. And he apparently didn't care for the restrictions as far as the styles of cuts you can give the guys in the military. So that gave him the idea to come to Los Angeles. Now, he considered working in the medical field and in the legal field, but he decided on hair. And he went to cosmetology school to learn how to style women's hair. Now, he thought that men deserved the same treatment that women did, taking more time to consider their hair. There were men's clothing shops everywhere, but nothing specifically for men's hair cutting, aside from, the traditional $2 corner barbershop cuts. So Jay went on his own to learn how to style men's hair. He took inspiration from European hairstyling because wet hair was still a big deal back then. Brill cream, the wet head, that was a thing. And Jay took it upon himself to learn otherwise, to cut hair dry using blow dryers and combs and scissors as opposed to clippers, and hairspray for a more natural look. He also adopted the name Jay Sebring, using Jay, initial of his middle name, and Sebring for the famous car race in Florida. A former girlfriend of Jay introduced him to singer Vic Damone, and he cut Vic Damone's hair, and he was so impressed that he recommended Frank Sinatra, and then it really took off for Jay. That was his big break. It gave Jay the courage to open up his own salon and charge a lot of money for haircuts because he realized that celebrities were really responding to it. In 1959, he opened up his salon at 725 North Fairfax. Steve McQueen, Cliff Robertson, Paul Newman, Kirk Douglas, Dennis Hopper, Robert Wagner, Brando, Jim Morrison, they all became clients of Jay Sebring. In 1960, he married 17-year-old Cammie Marple, who was an actress. She was in a film called The No-Mobile and a lot of other things. And they were together for about 3 years. So the middle door would have been the stairs to Jay's private office. As I understand it, that's the door to the men's salon, and the door on the left is the women's salon. And that is, I can confirm, where they shot Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in that side. Because I was there. So this would have been Jay's staircase. So this is where the wall said Sebring. Right about there, and those 6 windows. So, and in the photographs I took when they were shooting, Jay's Porsche was parked here. There's the newsstand. Had old magazines in it. All those old cars were parked in the parking lot over there. The Oscar Mayer Wienermobile was parked over there. None of this stuff actually showed up in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but eventually will. So Tarantino rented out Jay's old salon, which was a gay bathhouse at one point in time. So Jay's salon was on the right, and now, according to one of the pictures, I always thought that these 6 windows were part of Jay's salon. But now I think this was a parking garage, or a thoroughfare for the parking in the back. Somebody I know who said they work for Jay told me that this was a driveway through here, which you can kind of see. This is the back of the salon where valet parking would pick up their guests' cars, and they could be assured discretion walking into Jay's salon. Jay was also very well known for men's hair pieces, and he had a private room set aside for men getting their hair pieces done. His salon was described as a spectacle. He adopted the use of the Egyptian Ankh symbol, which is the Egyptian symbol of life. And there were stained glass windows, there was, everything was gold, hardware, antiques on the shelves, coffee percolating on the stove, a red telephone just for patrons by each chair, constant hi-fi music, and a chessboard. The only item common to most barbershops are the barber chairs and the stacks of movie magazines where clients could read about themselves. And Jay's stylists were under strict instructions never to indulge in gossip. Jay bought a house just north of Beverly Hills on Easton Drive, just off Benedict Canyon, and right about that time, he and Cammie split up. And in 1964, Jay started dating Sharon Tate and fell in love. Now we're actually above the house on Easton Drive, and Jay would park his Porsche up here and walk down this wonderful staircase to a view of above the pool and of this wonderful house that was built in 1930. Now, when Jay was dating Sharon, there's a really well-known photograph you're going to see in just a moment of Sharon standing on this staircase. As I mentioned before, Paul Byrne worked as an executive for MGM, and he and Jean Harlow dated for a while. They got married actually in July 2nd of 1932, and on September 5th of 1932, Paul Byrne died of a gunshot wound to the head in this house. There's speculation about it may not have been suicide. Who knows actually. But we do know for a fact that this is the house that Paul Byrne died in. And Jay Sebring was actually attracted by that story. He thought it was kind of cool. And he made the odd remark. He said that when I go, the whole world's going to know about it. Now, there is a paranormal story attached to this house. I found the article. It was by a guy named Dick Kleiner, written in 1966. And it reads, a boyfriend of the glamorous young star Sharon Tate owns a house in Benedict Canyon, which was once owned by Jean Harlow, and she was married to Paul Byrne. One night when Sharon's boyfriend, Jay, was out of town, she called him and asked if she could stay in the house overnight. She said, I had funny feelings every time I was there, and I wanted to see what would happen. That night, as she sat in the bedroom, she saw a, quote, creepy little man. And there were other visions. She ran downstairs and she said, I saw a vision of someone tied to the staircase. It might have been me, it might have been Jay. Whoever it was a cut open at the throat. She wanted a drink for nerve steadying purposes, and she didn't know where the bar was. Something told her to open a bookcase, and inside that bookcase was a hidden bar. She poured a shot. There was some wallpaper below the hidden bar. For some reason, she picked at it and tore it away. It covered a lovely copper base to a wine cellar. Now, there are recently discovered 8mm movies of Jay and Sharon and a few friends here by the pool of this house. There's Sharon Tate standing in that doorway that you can see just to the right of those lawn chairs. So here they are standing at this staircase. It looks almost exactly the same. This house was used in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tarantino did shoot at this house. I introduced Tarantino to the owners of this house, and they spent 2 weeks getting it prepped for the shoot. It ended up not being used in the released film, but it will be. There's Emil Hirsch with the character Mike Moe, I think is his name, that played Bruce Lee. That's the only part of this house that actually ended up showing in the film. And here is Jay and Sharon together. Sharon and Jay were together for about 1.5 years, and she went to Europe to make a movie called The Fearless Vampire Killers with Roman Polanski, and Roman pursued her quite aggressively, and she fell for him and dumped Jay. Now, Jay was apparently devastated by this, and when Roman and Sharon got married, that well, it devastated him even further. Now, he still remained friends with Sharon Tate, and he asked her to introduce him to Roman, and the three of them actually became very close friends. Jay Sebring was not the inspiration for the Warren Beatty character in Shampoo, though Jay probably went on a bit of a tear with the ladies after they broke up. I don't think he was ever, Warren Beatty slut style. But the character that Warren Beatty played in Shampoo was based on a combination of people, possibly Jay, a man by the name of Jack Sahakian, a film producer by the name of John Peters, who was also a stylist, and according to a book called Warren Beatty Seduced America, it was said that he was based on the Beverly Hills hairdresser Jean Shakov. In August of 1969, Sharon was staying at the house on Cielo Drive with 2 other people, Abigail Folger and Wojciech Frykowski. Roman was in London making a movie, and Jay and Sharon and the others hung out together. Late in the afternoon of August 8th, that Friday night, Jay left the house on Easton Drive for the last time. He was driving his black 1969 911 T Coupe with the air-cooled rear engine. Thanks, Patrick, for that information. His neighbors last saw Jay traveling down Easton Drive and making this left. One of them commented that they waved at Jay and he did not wave back. And this is the very route that Jay drove to the house on Cielo Drive. So on the left is the legendary El Coyote Mexican restaurant. It's not famous for its food. The food's good, and it's reasonably priced, but it's legendary around LA because it's where Sharon Tate and J. Sebring and Abigail Folger had their last supper, according to most published sources, on the night, Friday night, August 8th, 1969. As the legend goes, Sebring signed in party of four. They were sat in a section of a waitress named Kathy Palmer. According to the book Helter Skelter, she was the one who waited on them. And according to their autopsy reports, Sharon would have had the enchiladas and Abigail Folger the corn tamales. They left the El Coyote about 9:45 and went back up to their home, and they were dead in about 3 hours. Now, when the detectives were investigating the crimes, they went to the El Coyote because a couple of people claimed they were invited to have dinner with them, but not a single person in the El Coyote could remember seeing them, including Kathy Palmer. So I don't even know how that name came about in the book Helter Skelter, but that's what was published. And Kathy Palmer was shown photographs. In fact, everyone working there that night was shown photographs of the victims, and no one remembered seeing them here that night. So it's up for speculation. It's not a set in stone, but it's LA lore, and I go there all the time for that reason. So, and everyone believes that to be true.
The four of them returned to the house on Cielo Drive, and we kind of know what happened in there. Sharon Tate was actually strung up with a rope around her neck, and it was thrown over a beam and then tied around Jay's neck. And Jay objected to this, and after Tex told him to shut up, they shot Jay and then stabbed him 7 times, I believe. And then the rest of it is pretty much well known. But Jay died protecting Sharon Tate, or defending Sharon Tate. The funerals were set up on the same day. Those who attended Sharon Tate's funeral could attend Jay's a little bit later in the day. Guests included Steve McQueen, who delivered a brief eulogy, Henry Fonda, Peter Fonda, Paul Newman, Alex Cord, George Hamilton, James Garner, John Phillips and Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas attended Jay's California funeral. From Forest Lawn, Glendale, Jay's body was shipped back to Detroit, Michigan. I'm at the former location of the Ted C. Sullivan Funeral Home. This is 14230 McNichols in Detroit. And Saturday morning after the murders, Jay Sebring's funeral was held in this building. Jay's body was in state here for Friday, and at 9:30 in the morning it was taken from here to Precious Blood Church. So this is the former Precious Blood Church where Jay Sebring's funeral was held. The funeral mass was held here on a Saturday morning. He was taken from this church to Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. to see Jay at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in Southfield, Michigan. This is a beautiful, beautiful cemetery. I love this place. Stop here and get my bearings, get my map.
Well, I'm sure there's a story there. Still looking. So I'm here at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. This is a message I got this years ago. Lot 281, grave 12, section 24. So we're in section 24. This is always a treat, trying to figure out how the hell these are set up. He was a veteran, so I was sort of surprised he didn't have a military tombstone. Section 24, 281. Let's see. Well, it's a little bit easier to find than I anticipated, and someone did visit him for the 4th of July. Somebody fucking glued an ankh to it. Jesus. You know, glued it. Assholes. Jay, look what they did to your shop. They brought it back. There's your Porsche. There's you in front of your shop. And look at that. They put it back. How cool is that? So you were not forgot. Guy by the name of Emil Hirsch portrayed you. They went up to your old house on Easton Drive and shot up there for quite a while. And a couple days anyway. And when Quentin said, "Hey Scott, meet Jay Sebring," I knew it wasn't you, but it was pretty darn close, and I got pretty choked up. So, rest in peace. You did some great work. You left a mark, and you died sticking up for a woman who was pregnant. So, rest in peace. I want to reassure you that I put all that stuff back on Jay's grave and I took my things when I left. So those tributes, aside from the ones that are stuck to his tombstone earlier, his marker is gone. I tried to leave it looking better than I found it. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it very much. Jay's own nephew actually is releasing a documentary later this year called Cutting to the Truth. I can't wait to see that. The date of this recording is July 31st, 2023. 54 years ago today, the body of Gary Hinman was discovered. Now, when most people refer to the Tate LaBianca murders, they refer to the 7 victims on those 2 nights in August of 1969. But a couple of weeks prior to that, there was another murder that's associated with the Charles Manson friends and family. Gary Hinman was either a friend or a business associate of Manson's. And due to a reason which is still up for speculation, mostly people say drugs, money, whichever it is, Gary Hinman was murdered by an associate, being Bobby Beausoleil, of Manson. And his body was finally discovered on July 31st at 8:25 a.m. He had been killed several days earlier. Therefore, Gary Hinman's body was a mess when they found it. Gary Hinman was not in good shape. In fact, when his friends went to check on him at about 8:30 or 8 p.m., they smelled the odor and found Gary Hinman and called the sheriff. Upon inspection at the coroner's office, the decedent was found to have a possible lacerated face, as far as numerous wounds of the chest. There was no light in the room where the decedent was, and it was difficult to check thoroughly. Decedent was lying in a supine position, covered with a blanket. On arrival of the sheriff's unit on the floor, no further investigation was done, or no further information at that point in time. He was taken to the coroner's office where he was autopsied, and the examination of the body, I'll read it from the autopsy report. The unembalmed body is that of a rather deformed, bloated, decomposed body of a male, showing moderate gaseous distension, whose height is 68 inches and weight is 150 pounds. There is extensive infestation by insect larvae. There is extensive skin slippage. There is extensive marbling and putrefaction changes. The external genitalia are male. No surgical scars are recognizable. No evidence of traumatic injury to the extremities are noted. A fine linear mark is present on the dorsal aspect of the wrist, which is approximately 3 inches in length. However, this is so superficial with the presence of dried blood on the surface. The hair is easily detached. So you can imagine he was not in good shape when they found him, and ultimately his cause of death was established as stab wounds to the chest. Gary Hinman was taken back to Colorado with his family and buried there. This is a trip that I took a few years ago from Malibu. We drove from Malibu to the Hinman house, just to give you an idea of what it was like to go to the Hinman house. Topanga Canyon is a beautiful area of Los Angeles, though it's a bit ritzy now. It used to be very hippie-like, lots of communes and cheap rent. In fact, Linda Ronstadt claimed she lived next door to Gary Hinman at the time, which is crazy to think about. But you're going to see the journey from Malibu to Gary Hinman's house on Old Topanga Canyon Road. The house is still the same house technically. It hasn't been demolished, though most people would think it is. It's still standing, but a lot of new house has been built around it. I just checked Zillow as I'm making this video and saw that it's actually on the market right now for $2 million. The house was built in 1934, as you can see in the listing, but it's a considerably different house than it was when it was first built, and very different from the way it was in 1969. They published some interior pictures of the house, but again, it looks probably nothing like it did when Hinman was murdered, and the word political piggy was written on the wall in Hinman's blood. And Bobby Beausoleil was ultimately arrested with the murder weapon in his car, and he is still in prison today. The first clip you're going to see is from our documentary, The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, that we did a few years ago. Mike Dorsey, myself, and Lloyd Bryan Adams. And you're going to see the Hinman house, the way it looked. This was probably, I don't know, probably 15 years ago that we made this documentary. So I'll show you that clip first, and then the journey from Malibu to the Hinman house. Gary Hinman, a friend of the Manson family, a musician, a teacher, a Buddhist, possibly a drug dealer. He either burned Bobby Beausoleil, who was an associate of the family, on a mescaline deal, or possibly came into some money that Manson wanted. Hinman was held captive in his own house and tortured for several days. At one point, Bobby apparently phoned Manson, and Manson and family member Bruce Davis showed up at Hinman's house. During the altercation, Manson famously sliced Hinman's ear with a large knife or a sword, and the girls who were there stitched it up with dental floss. Eventually, they held a pillow over Hinman's head, and Beausoleil stabbed him to death while Hinman chanted the Buddhist chant. They then wrote the words "political piggy" on the wall in Hinman's blood and drew a paw print to make it look like the Black Panthers had committed the murders. Bobby then took off in Hinman's car and was arrested a few days later while sleeping in the back seat. Hinman's murder weapon was found hidden in the car's wheel well, still covered in Hinman's blood. One theory suggests that one of the motives for the Tate LaBianca murders, just a couple of weeks later, may have been to create copycat crimes to make it look like Beausoleil wasn't Hinman's murderer. Like Hinman's murder, the Tate LaBianca murders would feature multiple stabbings, words, including the word pig, written on the walls in the victim's blood. Surely the cops had arrested the wrong guy for Hinman's murder. So this is the drive from Pacific Coast Highway to Old Topanga Canyon Road, where the Hinman murder house is. I did this in real time. There are no edits. This is the genuine trip from the ocean to Hinman's house. It's a long trip. Join me.
Girls and boys gather under rocks to plan. Pure as dirt, pinky swear on left hands. Tie the knot with their Aryan plot and slither up the hill to sweet Glasses crash under LA night sun. Stars are in icing cake on their chin. Children climb, dismantling time, tumbling down the telephone line. White, white, crass and polite. White, white, white just for spite. White, 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 how very trite. White. Sing along with dirty old hearts. Family game, pretending for fame. Hide away, the desert will stain, infesting every plan, every play. White, white, crass and polite. White, white, bright white. Rock stars, squealers, gold record dealers. Sex wars, high scores, stars on the boulevard. Call and
Good evening, everyone. This is Scott with Dearly Departed. Now, the vlog I put together for today is about Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecutor on the Manson trial. He was one of my heroes for decades. As you'll hear throughout the video, you're going to hear a lot of wind noise. And I'm so sorry about that. I have been doing this, you know, granted, not for very long, but I've tried different cameras, I've tried different microphones, several different methods, and I can't perfect it. So you're going to hear wind noise. I apologize. I thought I had positioned the microphone properly, and so it wouldn't get any wind anyway. But Forest Lawn's windy anyway. So that's what you're going to hear today. But Bugliosi was one of my heroes. He wrote the book Helter Skelter, co-wrote it with Kurt Gentry. He prosecuted the Manson trial. And he also produced the first and second Helter Skelter movies, which I loved. And he's caught a lot of flack in recent years because of the method of his prosecution and the race war being questionable, and his methods of prosecution being questionable. However, the outcome is how it should have come out, where they were sentenced. But the method was, you know, I say it's kind of questionable. But if it wasn't for the book, if it wasn't for those movies, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. You know, it was a fascination for me. It's much like Kenneth Anger's Hollywood Babylon. It's nonsense, and it's a great picture book. Helter Skelter isn't nonsense. It's a historic document of the trial. So I hope you like this little tour, my little tribute to Vincent Bugliosi. I was a big fan. He was always really nice to me, and well, the few times I met him. And I don't know, rest in peace.
So this is the Glendale home where Mr. and Mrs. Bugliosi lived for 20 years. They sold it in 1998 for $700,000. It's a 3,400 square foot house. It was built in 1939. But this is where the Bugliosis were living during the trial when he was prosecuting the Manson case. And they had undercover police officers outside and supposedly a hotline to the police department from here in case their phone lines were cut during the trial, because there was a lot of scrutiny, a lot of death threats, no doubt. And this is where they lived until they sold it in 1998 and moved to Pasadena. Well, I tried waiting in the car for a really long time, but these guys with the leaf blowers and the lawnmowers and the weed whippers aren't going anywhere. So, sorry about the noise, but I want to do this before it gets too late. So this cute little Queen Anne style home is the last home of Vincent Bugliosi. Bugliosi lived here. He bought the house with his wife Gail, probably 1998, and moved here from Glendale. And this is where he was living when he died. Cute little house. So you can see he would have wanted to downsize from the one in Glendale. Now in 1999, my brother actually wrote Mr. Bugliosi here and sent him a first edition of Helter Skelter and asked for Mr. Bugliosi to put his favorite quote in it. And what he wrote was, Mr. and Mrs. Michaels, regarding a favorite quote of mine, I've not stopped to think about it before, but no one favorite quote comes to mind. There have been a considerable number of quotes thought throughout the years that I've liked. Here are a few that immediately come to mind. Voltaire's common sense isn't very common. Truth is often an elusive fugitive, but I believe if one vigorously pursues it long enough, it can be found. If 50 million people say a foolish thing, it's still a foolish thing. So, I actually found a poster of Mr. Bugliosi when he was running for district attorney. And I sent it to this address, rolled up in a tube, and asked for his autograph on it. And he kept it for quite a long time. And then he died, and I thought I'd never see it again. Then, a couple of months after he died, that package arrived. The tube arrived, signed by Mr. Bugliosi. The poster was signed. So he must have signed it and left it here. Maybe someone else found it and decided to to finish up his work and stick it in the mail. I don't know what it was, but it showed up after he died, and it was pretty cool to get that signed by him. So this is the last home of Mr. Bugliosi, the last home while he was alive. He lived here when he died. This is Kaiser Permanente Hospital, 4867 Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. And this is the last breath location of Vincent Bugliosi, according to his death certificate. Vincent Bugliosi died on June 6, 2015 at 9:20 p.m. at Kaiser. Heart issues, pneumonia, rectal cancer, adult respiratory distress syndrome. Alright, so we're in Glendale, at Forest Lawn, Glendale, behind the Freedom Mausoleum. We're heading down to the last home of Mr. Bugliosi. Now, Bugliosi caught a lot of shit in recent years because of the helter-skelter theory, the war between the blacks and the whites, and what's fact, what's fiction. But the book Helter Skelter is, as my friend Michael pointed out, the truth of the trial. It's exactly what happened at the trial, during the trial, what they used to prosecute, what they used to find Manson and the others guilty. So it's an excellent resource. That's what I read it a couple of times when I was still living in Detroit. But I'm just saying, we've learned a lot since then, and I wonder about a lot of things. There's got to be some significance to this. Vincent Bugliosi with 2 tennis balls. I don't even... So whoever left these things here, forgive me. I'll put them back when I'm done. Don't understand the significance. But here's Mr. Bugliosi. And this is my copy of the book Helter Skelter that I had him, he autographed for me, I think, when I met him one of the times. Yeah. In fact, the second time I met him is when his wife recognized me from The Girls Next Door, because Mr. Bugliosi's wife used to play bridge at the Playboy Mansion, and so she knew Hefner and the girls, and Mrs. Bugliosi came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, I know you from that show." So August 18th, 1934, interesting to note, Mr. Bugliosi's birthday is the same as Roman Polanski's birthday. Died June 6, 2015. In the eyes of the world, the great majority of men are neither indispensable nor irreplaceable. A small minority are irreplaceable, but not indispensable. Our much-loved husband and father was both, forever enshrining him in the rarefied pantheon of greats. Let my work speak for me. So, thank you, Mr. Bugliosi, for the account of the trial, and for your book and ultimate movie, Helter Skelter, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here today. Here's an original newspaper ad from 1974 that was saved by my friend Jane Osborne's mother, Janet Brandis. She clipped it from a newspaper and
when Janet, rest in peace, passed away, Jane gave this to me. So this is the original ad from the newspaper in 1974. Not since In Cold Blood has there been a true crime story of this power and fascination. And here we are, over 50 years after the murders happened, and we're still talking about it.
We're here at Rose Hills Cemetery in Whittier, California, to pay our respects to a man named Roy Justice Burrell, better known as Rusty Burrell.
What you are witnessing is real. The participants are not actors. They are actual litigants with a case pending in a California municipal court. Both parties have agreed to dismiss their court cases and have their dispute settled here in our forum, the People's Court.
The cemetery is one of the largest, if not the largest cemetery in America, so we stopped at the front desk to get directions.
Yeah, so according to the cemetery, we're going to the directions they gave us, section 2220. So we go to the left, 7 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we go 12 in. Oh, there he is. Roy Burrell.
And Clara Burrell. And there he is. There we are. So Roy Burrell, his nickname is Rusty. Now Rusty Burrell, most people probably remember him as the bailiff on the People's Court with Judge Wapner. But for our purposes, we're here because of this. You see, Rusty Burrell, aside from being a famous bailiff on television, was actually the bailiff during the Tate LaBianca trial.
Supposed to plead guilty or not guilty, but they never got around to that. They spent the whole time arguing whether Manson should be allowed to act as his own lawyer in the case. Manson told the court, "Lawyers generally play with people. I am a person and I don't wish to be played with." He said more than 10 lawyers have come to his cell offering themselves, but he doesn't want them and wouldn't trust the court to...
Roy Burrell was nicknamed Rusty because of his red hair when he was growing up. He was born in 1925 in Metropolis, Illinois. Rusty lied about his age to enlist in the Navy in World War II. After his discharge, he played professional baseball as a pitcher for the St. Louis Browns farm system. According to Rusty's son, Rusty came to Los Angeles to play ball and stayed. A friend of Rusty's, who was a former police officer, was working as a store security guard and suggested that Rusty join the department. After a short time with the Pomona Police Department, Rusty switched to the Sheriff's Department in 1950 because it paid about $90 more a month. He became a bailiff because a particular judge, Judge Elmer Doyle, liked his sense of humor. Rusty said, "I was visiting a friend of mine who was working in Judge Doyle's courtroom. The judge loved to play practical jokes on people, and when I laughed at one, he pulled me over and asked me if I'd like to become his bailiff." A bailiff is responsible for maintaining security in the courtroom and ensuring that appropriate courtroom decorum is maintained. In addition, the bailiff must ensure the safety and security of inmates while in court. Bailiffs will implement as appropriate any orders issued by the judge. When instructed by a judge, a bailiff officially opens and closes the court. As the judge enters the courtroom, the bailiff will declare the entry of the judge and will also announce the courtroom rules that must be followed.
For a jury trial or hearing, the bailiff is responsible for escorting jurors to assigned locations, ensuring that jurors have all necessary materials and supplies, and remaining near the jury without engaging in any conversation related to the case. Any communications between the jury and the judge are handled by the bailiff when the jurors are deliberating. Now, in 1957, the television program Divorce Court began. The syndicated show featured a real attorney playing the judge and real lawyers, but used actors as litigants, recreating the real-life cases. The show's producers have been talking to Burrell about becoming an advisor on the show. According to Rusty's son, the producers thought Burrell could work as an advisor on the show. He knew so many attorneys and judges. Since Rusty was a good-looking guy, they thought he'd be a great fit for the show. No stranger to attention, Rusty moonlit as an actor, showing up on General Hospital, films like Fate is the Hunter, he was billed as a reporter, Take Her, She's Mine as a cop, and in the 1964 film Shock Treatment, billed as the, quote, second policeman. He worked for 25 of his 31 years in the LA County Sheriff's Department as a bailiff in the court system, including working with real-life Judge Wapner, an LA Superior Court judge. Best-selling crime book in history. Is a well-worn copy, as you can see, but I have found the section which pertains directly to him, and here's actually his obituary. 76 years old. He died of lung cancer in his home in Rosemary, which isn't too far from here. Real-life bailiff during a number of high-profile trials, including Charles Manson and Patty Hearst, the newspaper heiress kidnapped by radicals, who was later accused of joining their crimes. And he also worked with Superior Court Judge Joseph Wapner on the People's Court. During his time as bailiff, he worked on several well-known high-profile trials, including the 1948 red light bandit Carl Chessman, who was found guilty of kidnapping, robbery, and indecent assault of women. He was executed in 1960. Rusty oversaw the Patty Hearst bank robbery trial, the infamous Onion Field case in 1963 covering the death of Officer Ian Campbell, but certainly the most infamous trial was in 1970, the trial of Charles Manson and other members of Manson's entourage for the Tate-LaBianca murders. The jury were sequestered for 9 months while the trial was going on, a very colorful and eventful trial. Rusty wasn't the only bailiff. For the women, there were 4 female bailiffs. They stood behind the 3 seated women defendants. 5 male bailiffs stood by the table where Manson sat. One of the bailiffs had his hands on the back of Manson's chair. There were perhaps a dozen other sheriff's deputies and police officers on both sides of the court railing. At one point during the trial, Charles Manson told a bailiff, "I'm going to have Bugliosi, the prosecutor, and the judge killed." Knowing Manson's record, officials did not take this to be an idle threat, and a bodyguard was assigned to accompany Mr. Bugliosi during the remainder of the trial. At one point, Manson and the 3 young women defendants stood up in court, their arms outstretched at their sides, then their heads bowed. The judge ordered them to sit down, but they ignored him. The judge ordered the bailiffs to put the 4 in their seats. Manson tried to fight the bailiffs, but one grabbed his wrist, another hung onto his long, shaggy hair, and a third tried to handcuff him. The women, Susan Atkins, Leslie Van Houten, and Patricia Krenwinkel, sat down, then jumped up again. "You may as well kill us all," they said. "We can't get a fair trial." During the trial, Rusty never left Manson's side. Manson once said to him, "Rusty, why didn't you let me go?" Rusty replied, "Charlie, you know I can't do that." Charlie said, "You know I could get up and walk out of here any time I want." And Rusty replied, "Charlie, you won't even get to the door." So during the trial, this is October 5th of 1970 during the trial. It happened less than the time it takes to describe it. With a pencil clutched in his right hand, Manson suddenly leapt over the counsel table in the direction of Judge Older. He landed just a few feet from the bench, falling on one knee. As he was struggling to his feet, the bailiff landed on Manson's back. 2 other deputies quickly joined in, and after a brief struggle, Manson's arms were pinned. As he was propelled to the lockup, Manson screamed at Older, "In the name of Christian justice, someone should cut your head off."
Adding to the bedlam, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Van Houten stood and began chanting something in Latin. Older, the judge, much less disturbed than I would have expected, gave them not one but several chances to stop, then ordered them removed. According to the bailiffs, Manson continued to fight even after he'd been taken into the lockup. It took 4 men to put the cuffs on him. So that was quite a dramatic turn of events in the courtroom that Rusty Burrell... This actually works into, you know, when we did our documentary, The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, because this is another bizarre degree of Helter Skelter. You can associate the People's Court with the Manson murders.
Superior Court Judge Joe Wapner retired from the court in 1979. Rusty Burrell retired in 1981. Judge Wapner was approached to start a television courtroom drama, The People's Court. Wapner said of Rusty Burrell, "I wouldn't do it without him. He knows how to deal with the people, and he's got such a great sense of humor." The People's Court ran from 1981 to 1993. Rusty's son, Larry Burrell, said that he enjoyed being on television, but it wasn't his big thing. He was never a Hollywood guy, and honestly, he did it to support his family. After 12 seasons on the People's Court, the show decided not to have them back, leaving Judge Wapner and Bailiff Rusty without a job. But 5 years later, in 1998, Judge Wapner and Rusty returned to television on the Animal Planet Network on the show Judge Wapner's Animal Court. The famous Judge Wapner and his trusted sidekick Rusty presided over real court cases that related to or involved animals. The animals, everything from horses to monkeys, were always in the courtroom with the defendants.
All parties and witnesses, raise your right hands and be sworn. The Animal Court is now in session. The Honorable Joseph A. Wapner, judge presiding.
I've been a judge for 32 years. Oh, we're going to have fun with this one. Oh. How do you do? But I mean, why a guinea pig? I mean, I can understand cats, dogs. Why guinea pigs? What is this creature here before me? Now, what do you call this?
A potbelly pig.
This is a 7-foot green Burmese python.
You be sure you hold on to it.
Yes, sir.
Whoa.
The show lasted 2 seasons. It ended in 2000. Rusty and his wife, Clara May, lived in Rosemead, California, in this house. They enjoyed their lives with their 2 sons, 5 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. And it was in this home that Rusty passed away on Monday, April 15th, 2002, of lung cancer. He was 76 years old.
So this is Rusty from the People's Court, Rusty from the Helter Skelter Manson murders, and the bailiff for the city of Los Angeles, and Patricia Hearst, and all in all, a good guy, and he looks like he liked a glass of wine too, and his wife Clara, who died 5 years later. So rest in peace, Rusty and Clara, and thanks for all your service. It's interesting to note when I asked what his name was, it's on the sheet, Roy Justice Burrell. So Justice looks like it may have been his real name, which is kind of cool. So if you want to come and pay your respects to Rusty, you know where to look. Rest in peace, Rusty. Since the notorious events of August of 1969 in Los Angeles, the name Spahn Ranch, or George Spahn, the names have become synonymous with association with horrific people and horrific crimes. I knew there's more to it than that, so today I'm taking a little bit of a dive into who George Spahn was and a bit about the ranch. Right off Topanga Canyon, there's the 118 freeway. Down below it is Santa Susana Pass Road, and we are now on the ground where Spahn Ranch stood. And when the ranch burned in 1970, they just literally plowed the ranch into the riverbed. I mean, just they think that people say they hauled it away. It's like, no, they just took bulldozers and bulldozed it into the riverbed. And so when you go down there, you can crawl around, you can find all kinds of stuff. So much stuff that it gets boring. You're like, oh, yeah, there's that. But every once in a while, you found like a a doorknob or something like that. But that's a very famous shot when you saw the mailbox of the Spahn Ranch. This is the mountain range in the back, and look who's back. Squeaky. George is back on the ranch, thanks to Mike Sanso. Let's take George on a little walk. See, these are all new telephone poles from the fires. We're going to go down to the cave in the rock. What do you say, George? Isn't this cool? My buddy Mike made these, and he doesn't sell them. I think he could, but very easily because they're so well done. But look at that. George is back on the Spahn Ranch.
Just about 16 miles outside of Los Angeles, 55 acres, which originally started as a dairy farm, later becoming host to Western-themed film shoots and horseback riding and sinister inhabitants. The previous owners purchased the property in 1947 off Santa Susana Pass Road and built a trading post in a fake little town hoping to attract filmmakers. The exterior of the town looked authentic, but inside the doors were empty rooms, mostly used for storage. There were several Western film ranches in the area, most notably the Iverson Ranch, which was almost directly across the street. On the Iverson Ranch is what is known as the Garden of the Gods, a spectacular rock formation which overlooks Spahn Ranch. It's still there. A visit there is allowed, it's encouraged, and it absolutely is worth the time. The popularity of Westerns at the time and the ideal landscape of the area made these ranches a perfect choice for filming.
This is the shittiest part of the trek.
Yeah.
Is getting down from this dirt road down to there. But otherwise, it's pretty easy to get down there. We just happened to spot this graffiti. This vandalism. Spahn Ranch.
George Christian Spahn was born in Philadelphia. His father had died in a working accident when George was just 2 years old. He left school after the 3rd grade and worked as a mailman and as a carpenter. He set up a business in Willow Grove, owning 5 carriages and 7 horses. By the time he was 30, he owned his own ranch in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, and he married Martha Greenholz. They had 10 children together. During the Depression, George and his family sold his farm, took his favorite horses, and headed to California. In the 40s, he and his wife separated, and in 1953, he bought the movie ranch, which would eventually carry his name. He offered horseback riding and, of course, film shoots. But after a while, there was a decline of Westerns, and, well, the ranch went bankrupt. A lot of people think that the location of the ranch was actually far into the property, but it was literally right off the road. You could drive right in. Now, George, his treatment of animals had been questionable. He was once cited and sentenced to 10 days in jail for, when an inspection of the property was made, a dead donkey was found in 3 feet of manure inside one of the stables. By the late 60s, the number of Western ranches available and the decline of Westerns being filmed caused Spahn Ranch to fall on hard times. It actually just about dried up, and the ranch existed only with a skeleton crew, surviving on an occasional porn movie shoot and, of course, horseback riding. Enter Charles Manson. George was 80 years old and nearly blind when Charles Manson offered to trade. He and his band of friends offered to help maintain the ranch and horses in exchange for being able to live in the abandoned Western set, sleeping in those storage rooms on filthy mattresses and living in filth. But they kept George happy by cooking and cleaning for him and offering him company. They say Lynette Frame got her nickname Squeaky from the noise she made when George ran his hand up her thigh. He also gave the nickname Tex to Charles Watson.
When he was arrested, Tex Watson drew a map of the ranch, which is still surprisingly accurate today. At one point, the Lone Ranger himself showed up on the ranch, Clayton Moore. He was touring the area and showing his 11-year-old daughter where they filmed the legendary TV show, and he decided to pay his old friend George Spahn a visit. He said when he arrived, he saw about a dozen young people on George's porch. The group, which included Charles Manson, pointed him to George Spahn's trailer. He said he found George just sitting there, motionless. He said when he spoke to George, George began to cry. Clayton said they talked for a while, but George seemed distressed and didn't say much. The visit lasted less than an hour. George asked him to return, but Clayton came face to face with Manson and left. Moore said, "I was lucky enough to be able to walk away from those people with my life." It was also the location that the infamous events of August of 1969 were thought out and kicked off. The killers leaving from and returning to the property. The George Spahn tour of Los Angeles continues. And George is now sitting on what is referred to as the Manson Rock. And this is where Manson would sit and play the guitar, and his followers would, what did they say, that Susan Atkins would shake in orgasmic frenzy, or anyway, George is back on the Spahn Ranch. And this is where Manson was playing when he auditioned for Terry Melcher. People come out here. This is not the way it was. I mean, people come out here still all the time and play music. And but so this is not like original. And that rock did say Manson at one time. And I think that somebody said the church or the people that cracked his name off of it. But here he is. And now we'll go to the rock. The common thought until recent years was that the location of the ranch today is on private property, an untruth perpetuated by a grumpy man whose property was adjacent to where the ranch was. He gleefully charged hikers with his golf cart and threatened to call the authorities and report them for trespassing. I can assure you the property is part of the California Santa Susana Pass Historic State Park and is accessible to everyone. But pay attention to some legitimate no trespassing signs in the area. You are legally allowed to scramble around. Just be careful of poisonous plants and rattlesnakes. Well, now we're at the Manson Cave off the Spahn Ranch, and look who came to join us. George. George made it back to the cave. I wonder how many times that's happened. Probably not. But we're down at the place. It's about a quarter mile away from the main ranch. Ready, George? Let's go. George Spahn had a ranch hand known as Donald, nicknamed Shorty, Shea, a movie stuntman who became close to George. After the Tate LaBianca homicides, Shorty, who was known to detest Charles Manson, tried to convince George Spahn to kick the family off the ranch. Now, why would George get rid of his source of free labor and endless blowies? After a raid on the ranch for auto theft, Manson was convinced that Shorty Shea was behind it. 2 members of Manson's family took Shorty to the woods, killed him, and buried him. His body wasn't found until 1977. Now, after the convictions, George Spahn continued living at the deteriorated ranch with some of the girls from the family, well, the ones that weren't convicted of murder. He stayed until the Clampett fire in September of 1970. The fire had leveled the buildings at Spahn Ranch and scorched over 100,000 acres of brush, killing 4 people and destroying over 80 structures. George moved into this ranch-style home in North Hollywood, where he lived out his days. So we're here in North Hollywood to see this house, which is right in the sun, which you can't really see anymore. But this was the last home of Mr. Spahn. But this is where he lived until he died. Thanks to Mike Sansa, we have that actuality, we used to call him on the radio.
But last time I was out here several years ago, there was no fence. So you could see quite well. I think it was actually a wooden fence. It looked like a barn. But this is where Mr. Spahn lived his last days. I initially visited the home in the early 2000s when it looked like a typical ranch and barn. On a more recent visit, a paint job and a huge gate and fence surround the property. In declining health, George entered the Sherwood Convalescent Center in Van Nuys. This is where he died on September 22nd. He was 85 years old. George is buried in Eternal Valley Memorial Park in Newhall, California. A fire ravaged the area once again 35 years later, almost to the day. During this one, called the Topanga Fire, over 24,000 acres burned for 2 days, clearing the area out once again. My friends and I took to hiking in the newly cleared area. Since it's rarely without foliage, the ground was very soft. We sunk down about a foot, and we were able to walk around the entire area, discovering things that will probably never be seen again. While walking around, we came across a lot of odd junk that had been dumped there over the decades, were covered in the brush. We found shells of automobiles, several safes, actually, a cash register, a refrigerator, and a lot of unidentifiable pieces of melted metal. In 2023, you can still scour the grounds of the former ranch and still find artifacts. You don't even have to bother with a metal detector. The stuff is everywhere. There's even a vehicle half buried in the dirt as well. Because of its notorious inhabitants, George Spahn and the Spahn Ranch live in infamy. In 2019, the film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was released. The ranch was lovingly recreated for the film. This might have been a nod to the Clayton Moore story, but in the film, the fictional stuntman Cliff Booth returned to his old workplace, the Spahn Ranch, to pay a visit to George Spahn, who was portrayed by Bruce Dern. Cliff Booth was unsettled by the influx of hippies who crashing at the ranch. The role was originally offered to Burt Reynolds. Although Burt Reynolds made it to the initial production meeting, where there was a read-through of the script, Burt died on September 6, 2018, before production began. Thank you very much to my friends Annette and Aid, to Ginny, Phil, and Ann for that last trip up to Spahn after the last fire, to Michael Channels for the video footage, and to Mike Sanso for George Spahn in Plastic. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I wanted to tell you more about the Justice for Homicide Victims nonprofit organization. They provide support in dealing with the pain and suffering associated with homicide, when the survivors are usually totally misunderstood by their friends and relatives. Justice for Homicide Victims provides support for the victims who fight for their rights, help in coping with the complex legal system and law enforcement officials by providing an understanding of their role in the criminal justice system. They provide counseling and referrals to appropriate agencies set up by state and county to give various forms of assistance. They offer knowledgeable advice and involvement in the arraignment, preliminary hearing, and trial of the accused, with members attending sessions whenever possible. Justice for Homicide Victims also assists in gathering data for parole hearings. They conduct periodic seminars to help explain victims' rights and what to expect throughout the legal process. Law enforcement, district attorney staff, victim advocates, and other professionals participate and assist victims of crime to understand their rights. Their motto is a quote by the ancient Greek lawgiver Solon: "Justice will be served only when those who are not injured by crime feel as indignant as those who are." Please consider supporting them at justiceforhomicidevictims.org. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you very much for your attention. Rest in peace to all of the victims and all who were affected by these horrible crimes. And until next time.